Hi, and welcome to the Quick and Dirty Romance Podcast. We're your hosts, romance authors, and bicoastal best friends. I'm Skye McDonald, author of the Connecticut Commodore's Steamy Hockey Romance series.
And I'm Sarah Smith, author of the Denver Bashers Steamy Hockey Romance series.
And together we write as Sarah Skye, the best-selling duo behind the Unlikely Pairing series. We write hot books about complicated feelings, emotional risk, and really good sex.
Each episode will pull back the curtain on what's actually like to be contemporary romance authors. We'll talk writing desire, building tension, navigating publishing, and exactly how those infamous sex scenes come together on the page.
It's smart, honest, a little filthy, and wrapped up, as always, in 30 minutes or less. We respect your time, but we still aim to leave you breathless.
Before we get started, take a sec to tap those stars wherever you're listening. Ratings help more romance readers find us. And trust us, we notice every single one.
And now for today's episode, or tease, New Year, New Woman. Why romance loves reinvention.
So today's episode is all about reinvention because nothing says January like deleting half your personality, buying a planner, and swearing you're a brand new person by February, right? Right?
Indeed, indeed. Specifically, today we're going to talk about why reinvention works so well in romance and when it doesn't. Why does New Year, New Me hit differently in books? And is reinvention even possible, or is it another fantasy of romance?
So grab your coffee, your wine, your emotional support romance novel, whatever, and let's get into it.
Indeed. All right. So, reinvention, what does it look like in romance? How often do you feel like this comes up, and in what ways do you see it manifest, Sarah?
So I feel like this is a pretty common trope, honestly, like in a lot of romances, specifically timely because of the holidays, like in like Hallmark romances that I watch
Mm.
a lot of times.
Hmm.
Like typically it's like, the city girl going back home or having to go to a different, like smaller town to like do something for work or like go reconnect with her family. And
Cottage
she kind
Castle,
yes, exact. Or yeah, or like
as one
a
does.
castle or any kind of like or any kind of like fish out of water type of romance where the
Yes.
main character, male or female, is being put into an environment or a situation that's just like not the norm. So they have
Hmm.
to kind of like figure out, okay, do I want to exist here? Initially they usually don't, right? Like they usually don't. But then they eventually figure out like, oh, actually, this is who I really want to be. This is where I'm actually comfortable. The people here are the type of people that I like being around. And this is a person that I actually feel more connected with. So that I think is what made that's what I think of when I think of like romance reinvention. I think of it in like a holiday Hallmark romance context, but that's not the only, right? Like that's not the only situation that you see it in. It's in a lot of different situations.
No, but that's definitely a quintessential example. And obviously it's beloved because every year more and more Hallmark and Hallmark style Christmas romances come out, and more memes about said romances come out, and people love them. I love them. I can binge
I
watch that for hours.
Yes. I honestly just think they're really fun. Like, I think part of the reason why they appeal, at least for me, is because like I'm kind of a homebody. I don't want to be taking crazy risks in my real life, like I don't need to be selling my house and moving to some crazy place I've never been to before. So I like living vicariously through the romances that I read and write. It's like an escapism, I think, for me, you know?
It it is. I think it's the romance, if you will, of change, right?
Hmm.
The fantasy of throwing your life entirely up in the air and doing and living an entirely different way, right? Most of the time, we do see the trope play out where it's like from urban to a rural or like sort of cottage small town setting, right? Um, but it is underlying that the idea of just embracing an entirely different life, an entirely different lifestyle. And I think there is a great fantasy, and you see it play out in like dramatic films and dramatic stories as well, where like the two heroes, I mean, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, um, Shawshank Redemption. Everybody's like, where's Skye going with this? But like, of Mice and Men, it's the idea of like two people who love each other. Generally, like it tends to be two men, but it's like a platonic bond. But they have a dream of like, okay, we're gonna go to this place and we're gonna have an easier life. I mean, shoot, Stranger Things with Mike, Tell, and Elle, like at least one waterfall, right? If everybody just finished watching that, there you go. But it's the idea of like we'll get through this hard thing and we'll reinvent and we'll start all over. But the thing is in non-romance, it almost never happens,
Mhm.
right? Like the dream always remains the dream. Whereas in romance, because we're guaranteed the comfort of a happy ending, it does happen and it does work and reinvention is possible. So it's an interesting question of is it pure fantasy, right? Clearly people enjoy this idea, but like, is it pure fantasy, the idea of being able to reinvent, and more critically, how do authors sell that if it is mostly a fantasy? Most people don't actually change their whole life, right?
Right.
So how do authors make sure that it's done well and it's done in a way that people will wrap their arms around it as opposed to like, no way.
So I think, oh, I almost fell off my chair. I think, so I honestly think that the reason why it works so well is because I think that there are readers who that's what they're looking for. Like that's a need and a want that they have because like you said, it's a fantasy. Like
Mhm.
fantasy implies that it's not reality. So it's something that maybe you're not getting in your real life that you want to escape to, that you want to like maybe just imagine what that would be like to entertain that thought of like, okay, well, what if I were a sexy boss, girl boss or something, and I go
Mhm.
here and I explore this, or what if I like and not that it means that you like are unhappy with your life, but like I don't think there's anything wrong with indulging in a fantasy or an escapism. And it like that's I think why romance is so popular and so prolific. I think people like to escape. I think they like to imagine what it would be like to be a different kind of person, a different kind of character, a different kind of anything without the pressure of actually having to do it. Because like your life is your life, it's stable and it's safe. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like, do you actually want to be kidnapped by like a mafia billionaire boss? Probably not. Not in real life, but
Not
like
in real life.
no, but in romance fantasy world, yes, all day, every day, please. Like that's what I want.
Well, even as you're saying this, I'm recalling our most recent episode of Dick Size, right? Like, so this is another element of living the fantasy, right? So last month we talked about how, well endowed and physically, specimen men are part of the fantasy and part of like the escape that is romance, right? And now we're talking about like the trope of like flipping your setting, right? So it's all about the escape. Not
Mhm.
to say that your partner isn't physically, perfect in their own way, but like we're building a fantasy world, very much so. And so it's more than just his 8 pack or his however many inches, as like we said, we don't talk about that part, but it's also about it's an adventure, right? Like if the heroine is or hero, however, is going on an adventure to entirely change. I mean, you could look at it as the hero's journey, right? Like the whole idea of like leaving the home and like going away, making new friends, experiencing challenges and setbacks, and then either the return to the home, but generally the return to like some sort of normalcy, which in this case is a different life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think that makes sense. It's just like, I mean, I'm not trying to be like basic and simple about everything, but it's just like sometimes it's just fun to, like imagine what something else or something different or being something would be like. And there are ways you can reinvent yourself in real life, obviously. Like, I mean, like you said, we're in New Year's time, like people are doing
Hmm.
resolutions, people are trying to make changes into their lives, which is great. That's wonderful. I know a lot of people like hate New Year's resolutions, and that's cool too. Like they're not for everybody, but like there's just something really, I think, relatable about wanting to like change something about yourself. And you don't always succeed in doing that in real life, but like in a romance, um, it always works out. Like it always, there's never like, oh, I tried that. We tried to give this relationship a shot, it didn't work out. Like that's not what would happen in a romance. Like it always like in the Hallmark romance where she moves to the, the small town and falls in love with like the hot lumberjack. It's not like, and that didn't work out. Like it obviously works out.
Well,
It always works out.
one thing I'll say, like being the Aquarian cynic that I am, I love the movie The Holiday. Like it's one of my favorite holiday rewatches. I'll start making holiday cards and mail them out, and I will watch the mess out of that movie. I mean, Jude Law is just peak Jude Law, peak Jude Law. Um, but when I think about a woman like Cameron Diaz's character, she's a high-powered like film industry like executive. She runs her own company. She does like trailers or something. I don't know, something. And she lives in LA. And obviously, ultimately, she gets her HEA with Jude Law, who lives in a tiny town in England. And they make it all work out. And every time I watch it, I'm like, there is no way that relationship works out. Like, I want it to because it's so cute, but and the same is true for like when you watch these, there's a back corner of your mind that knows like it's very unlikely that somebody could long term be satisfied in this entirely different life if they weren't looking for it,
Hmm.
right? And that becomes a question of, yes, there is a certain amount, especially with holiday movies, that readers, viewers, consumers are willing to just suspend disbelief and say, no, this is a perfect story. And yes, she's fallen for the hot lumberjack. And obviously, this is all going to be fine. And she's going to give up her like extremely successful job and come and run an inn. And the margins are going to be terrible and they're not going to have a lot of money, but it doesn't matter because the sex is that good.
Hmm.
And so, in many ways, we are willing as consumers of love stories to suspend our disbelief and be like, no, of course it will. It'll be great. Um, but I'm wondering, in what ways can authors sell the fantasy so that it is more, I would say, believable, right? Or I don't know that it's necessary. Again, Hallmark makes tons of money on these relationships that clearly aren't probably going to work out. Like, if we're real about it. But like, if we're writing and we're really thinking about the craft of building a story and we want to bring in reinvention, in what ways have you played that out in books? Maybe not like a Hallmark movie, but in what ways have you worked to make it to sell the belief that the reinvention is authentic?
I think so when I do this, because I think there is an element of reinvention in every character or every romance
Hmm.
character that I've ever written. Because at the beginning of the book, they start out one way, and at the end of the book, they are different.
Hmm.
Not necessarily like a complete 180, like, oh, like totally different person, but like something in their life at the start of the story is just not satisfactory to them, or like
Hmm.
something bad happened and they're living with the pain of that, or whatever it is. But by the end of the story, it's either resolved or they've learned to cope with it and they find happiness with, like their partner or in in addition to like maybe like a job or like moving to a new place or whatever it is. Um, but I think the most important part of that is to make the characters and the situation relatable. I think you need to make them feel real. So like if
Hmm.
you write a character that like, oh, everything's perfect and they've never done anything wrong and they never make any mistakes and like every situation is just fantastic and handled perfectly, like I don't think that's relatable.
Hmm.
Like I and maybe this is ridiculous, but I honestly think like being a hot mess, I enjoy reading stories where the characters are a hot mess because I find that to be very relatable, specifically at certain like ages, right? So like because there's romance runs the gamut, like from very young to like older romance and like especially when the characters are like in their 20s, which is a lot of what I write. I don't know, when I was in my 20s, I don't think I was like a disaster or needed like an intervention or anything like that. But like, I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things that I probably, looking back, like if I were to go back, I'd be like, oh my God, don't do that, or don't hang out with this person, or don't date this person. You know what I mean? Like you make a lot of mistakes, but I think that that's relatable because that's
Hmm.
part of being human. And when you want to write something like a character reinventing themselves or just like developing as a character, you have to start at a very human place. And humans are flawed. We make like when you're 22, you go out with the douchey guy who like is super smooth, who like
Hmm.
buys you a drink at the bar. You know what I'm saying? You don't do that when you're like I'm 40 now. Like not that I don't go out to bars and do stuff like that now, but like there's no way in hell I would ever be like, yeah, thank you for this drink. Like, no, get the hell away from me. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Hmm.
yeah. So I think that like, I think you have to give an element of realism and like that you have to make the character relatable. You have to make them do something that like a normal person would do for it to work, in my opinion, as a writer.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of stories of people moving to a new location and starting over. Like the first, the only one that really comes to my mind is Not Suitable for Work, where she moves from New York to Nashville. And she does have to reinvent herself because she is a rock bottom. But then I think about like a character, I think my biggest character who really reinvented themselves was like Olivia in Nemesis because and to your point, not to get into the depth of the story, but to like just as an example, she got tired of being the person that she was. And she started to like through the story, not because she couldn't be loved without it, but like she just started to realize like this version of her wasn't working for her anymore. And like when she did, kind of to your point about being 20 and like making mistakes, so when she did start to like loop back to like knee jerk, this is how I've always done it, she would very quickly realize like this isn't working for me, right? Like I'm not satisfied by this anymore, so I'm going to do it differently. So there was like that element of choice to reinvent, which I think is really important because I do believe that people can 100% change. I just don't think other people can change you.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
like any idea, to me, something that would be a big plot hole for me is the idea that somebody changed for that person. Like that
Yeah.
does not work. It is not authentic. The
No.
change needs to be from like within, from
Right.
realizing like this isn't working for me, or
Mhm.
like I've made this mistake by saying yes to this douchebag at the bar, right? Like
Right.
you want to be,
We've all been
you
there.
want
It's okay.
Yeah, we've all been there. But like, but the change comes from like not somebody saying, you shouldn't say yes to the douchebag at the bar. It's from like realizing that that's not taking you where you want it to be. So I think that that's really, because you're right, like reinvention is part of the story, or like either reinvention or development, right? It doesn't have to be like, okay, I moved to a new town and I have a new job and I have a new this and I have a new, it could be like, I've been doing things this way and it's time to do it a different way. Or it's time to say yes to something that I've repeatedly pushed away.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. It doesn't need to be the CEO reinventing herself to become like like a micro farmer and
right,
like it
exactly.
doesn't have to be that extreme. It can be, at least in my opinion, it can be just like character development. It can be how a character goes from like unhappy and feeling alone and isolated to the end of the story where she's found her person, the most amazing guy. She's found a cool friend group. She's found a job that she's passionate about. She likes this new life that she's built. It can be that too. Like, and I think that
Yeah,
that honestly is a lot more relatable than some of the Hallmark romances where, the big time city girl goes to like a small town.
microfarming.
Falls, right. Um, but that's what's I think fun about the whole reinvention idea is that it
Hmm.
like completely dependent on how you as a writer want to interpret it in your characters and in your story.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's good to see it run the gamut. I mean, when we started thinking about what to do in January, I think reinvention's an excellent theme, but when we started talking about this, my first character that came to mind was our joint character of Marco, because that's
Mhm.
a place where I feel really, really proud of the work that we did to
Yeah.
change like that character changed like a
Oh yeah.
180
Yeah.
from Sips and Strokes into his book of Vibes and Feels, which you should definitely read if you haven't read it yet, everyone who's listening. But
Yes.
when you came to me with the idea of making basically our villain the hero, I really am. I'm always extremely proud of like the very authentic work that we did to redeem him. And, it's a thing that we've talked about in the past, but like that was a real example of a true reinvention that did not just go poof, magic wand, now you're
Right.
nice and hot.
No.
Like
No.
Marco really had to go through it, and I was proud
He
of the
was
work that we did.
Yeah, and just as a little just to fill you in. So Marco, in book one, he was like the cheating, douchey, arrogant jerk who just like ruins his life by being a cheating, douchey, arrogant jerk. So like his life is just ruined because of himself.
Mhm.
And but the what happens is because his life is ruined, like he realizes what was wrong, and what was wrong was him and how he was living his life and the choices he was making. And so we put him through the whole reinvention cycle. Like he has self-awareness, he realizes that
Therapy,
he goes to therapy, he realizes that like a lot of his family just sucks, so he needs to stop talking to his family. So he does that. He starts connecting with other people and starts learning what like, oh, this is what like emotionally healthy people do. Like, oh,
right?
they're loving and kind to each other. Like, just like all like the whole thing where like he realizes that he was in the wrong, but he's the one who makes the decision to change himself. Like nobody's telling himself like, hey, you need to be a better person. I mean, like people think that about him, but like it doesn't hit unless the character has the awareness to realize that he's a problem and is like reinventing himself and doing the work.
And he doesn't do it to get the girl.
No, 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 no.
Right? Like he doesn't do it to get Morgan. Like that's another piece that I think is really important is it's not like, oh, well, I'll fix myself for her. Again, going back to what I said, like he's not doing this to get sex or a girlfriend. He's doing it for himself, and that's why the romance works, in my opinion.
Yeah,
And
totally.
this does hit hard in January because we spend a lot of time, like the popular sentiment is that this is the time of year to reinvent yourself, right? Like new year, new me, all of this, like we said at the beginning of the show. And I think the reason that I thought this was like a really important moment to do this is just the reminder that like authentic change really is within you. And it doesn't happen like on a timeline. Maybe there's a catalyst that really pushes you out of a comfort zone. I doubt it's the turn of a calendar, right? Like, so all these expectations of like, okay, well, I'm going to change all these things. It's not realistic and it's also not necessary. So, like, I think as we enjoy the escape of movies, and it's interesting that the hallmarks are all set around Christmas, and then in the new year, you kind of get into some different genres and different like interests. They're not as popular at this time of year. Maybe because people are mostly worried about themselves, but
Mhm.
that's a total guess. But the idea that like you need to change is, I think it's important to realize that you don't, and that if you do, it really is only about like what you're willing to do, right?
Yeah.
So I thought this was a good kind of way to start the new year and ease into it because we do get hear a lot of noise about like, oh, well, this radical change happened. Like in the stories, like these people became micro farmers and they left their whole thing. And it's like, oh, well, maybe I should do that too. And I really think that you should only do that if it calls to you, but always just remembering that it is okay, right? Like whatever that means for you, and like just being okay with who you are is really kind of the heart and soul of everything, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really well put, Skye. So I
I don't
mean,
know.
yeah, no, I do. I think like reinvention means different things to different people, and it means different things whether you're reading a book that's a romance or like watching a Hallmark movie or just living your life and just wanting to just start things differently this year. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whether your near reinvention involves a vision board or just surviving the winter, I mean, you're doing it right. Whatever you want to do, as long as you're not hurting anybody, who cares, you know?
And as long as you're reading romance, that's exactly right. Because personally, I'm choosing rest this January, or choosing, I'm required to rest this January. But even so, reinvention, no reinvention. This episode was good for me. Was it good for you, Sarah?
Hell yeah. And if you loved this episode, take a second to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening.
It definitely helps more romance lovers find us, and we really, really appreciate it.
Until next time, stay sexy, stay soft, and read more romance.